Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Barbara Ramos-Cryer, and she's going to introduce herself, and then we'll get into the questions.
Hi, I'm Barbara Ramos-Cryer. I am the owner and founder of Beehive Family Services. We're located in Sandy, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
Awesome. Thank you. So what type of services does Beehive Family Services offer that can help families in the process of going through a divorce, paternity, or a child custody matter in the court?
So we offer individual counseling for kids, teenagers, adults. We also offer family therapy, couples counseling as well, and then co-parenting therapy as well. That's one that we are focusing on quite a bit right now. And then we are also beginning to offer custody evaluations. And oftentimes, as we offer these services, we are oftentimes working with other parties, kind of third-party collaborations with the courts, attorneys, other therapists, and whatnot.
Saw on the website that you have had experience with DCFS. So did your experience at DCFS affect your view on the family law system and if therapy used to help families through the times of divorce, paternity, and child custody cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So with DCFS, I was with them for like 3 years doing child protective services, which is the investigations part of it. And I got to see, a lot there. So on a couple of different ways, it kind of affected my view. So while I was at DCFS, some of the cases that we would investigate would be parents going through divorce, and some of those cases, not all of them, but some of them, it was just kind of calling each other to try and get like an upper hand during the custody process. So that was really frustrating, but it also let me know, that these families had needs that were not being met at that time. And then also, it allowed me to see that in some occasions, the legal system wasn't really working, for the families.
That helped like type change the type of therapy you offer, or like how you go about therapy with these clients that are in divorces and stuff like that?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I founded Beehive Family Services, was because I wanted to be able to focus on things like, like this high conflict, divorce cases and whatnot. I know that there are plenty of therapists out there, that do, therapy, but oftentimes what I have found is that a lot of therapists don't want to get involved in court matters. It's intimidating to some of them, or just that fear that is it going to end up, leading to legal proceedings to where they're involved in it. So they just don't want to get involved with that. They don't want to touch it. So, and that's kind of, those services that these families weren't getting. So that's why I decided to, found Beehive Family Services, to where we could provide, that support without, fear of communicating with attorneys and whatnot. And then also, when I was at DCFS, there were times when I felt like my hands were tied, right? Like there was nothing that I could do to support a family. So being a therapist has allowed me to be more involved with these families on a completely different level.
So, in your opinion, what factors make family therapy more likely to be successful, and what factors make family therapy more likely to be unsuccessful?
Right. So from my perspective, the biggest factor would be the parents' willingness to accept feedback and willingness to change. That is one of the main factors, in it being there successful. So in willingness doesn't always happen right away, right? We have to build that rapport. We have to build that trust, with the parents and with the children, the family as a whole, before we can expect, that willingness to accept feedback. So, the rapport that I have with family is also extremely important, that trust building.
Is family therapy successful when the children do not want to be involved and refuse to participate? And if so, how is it still successful?
Yeah, so it can definitely still be successful. And it kind of goes back to the parents, right? So if the parents are being involved and willing to change, kids will oftentimes follow, right? They're observing their parents all the time. And if their parents are okay, the parents are trusting this person, that they're trusting this therapist, then the kids will often do so as well. And then also there have been times, even with just individual counseling with kids where kids just don't want to come to therapy. Sometimes I've had kids that are court ordered to go to individual therapy. And they come in and they sit down and they're like, I'm not going to talk to you. I don't want this. I'm just here because my parents want me to, or because it's court order. But I have found, that if you give kids back their voice and their choice, that kids are often, more than willing to come back to therapy. I've had pretty much every single kid that was a refusal just continue coming to therapy. And it's to give them, it gives them a voice. Oftentimes that's a lot of the issues that's happening, with families is kids don't feel like they have a voice, right? Mom and dad rule, and they just kind of have to do what they're told, right? So when they come here, and you let them know, I want to hear you, I want to know what you need, it really opens that up for them. So yeah.
Yeah, because all through like the divorce process, they're never asked directly what they want, right? They have guardian litems, they have attorneys, then there's the judge, right? And sometimes they have therapists they've talked to who talks to the courts on behalf of them. I feel like sometimes kids feel really slighted that they never get to actually voice their opinion when it comes to child custody, but they're always telling other people what they think, and those people take their thoughts. And it's a game of telephone with the kids. I feel like it probably takes longer to build their trust because they've been
Right.
playing telephone with their emotions and feelings for the last few years going through the proceedings.
Right, right. There's so many people, making decisions for them that are going to affect them, for their whole childhood. But they can say, their GALs, they can tell their GALs, hey, this is what I want, right? But their GAL still has, they still have to make a decision what's best for the kid, right? And what the kids want might not always be what's best. But then, that also makes it hard sometimes, where the kids will kind of try and be more guarded, right? And that fear, well, if I say this, is this going to get back to, my mom or my dad or my GAL? So there's always that concern. And we've had cases in which that has been a concern to where we do safe harbor therapy. So that's where both parents sign an agreement and everything, absolutely everything that we talk about in therapy with a child is completely private. We don't really have that communication with the parents or with the courts or anything like that. Nothing can be subpoenaed. So that is an option as well.
Find doing safe harbor therapy helps kids open up more. Do you have more success with it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, like you said, so is that a legal document that's signed by everyone so that you can't be subpoenaed then?
Correct. Yeah, and it usually has to be court ordered as well. So
Okay.
oftentimes the judge will they will order safe harbor therapy. So
You mentioned earlier that Beehive Family Services offers parenting, co-parenting consultations and custody evaluations, that you're starting to do those. What are those services for people who don't know what they are, and how do they help families? And what kind of families with what kind of needs do they help?
right. So custody evaluations is something that has to be ordered, right? It's not something that the parents can just decide. I mean, they can decide to do, but it still has to be court ordered. And that happens when parents are unable to agree, about a divorce, things like parent time, custody, decision making, things like that. They have usually tried to resolve it in some way, but they haven't been able to be successful. So during a custody evaluation, I'll talk to the kids, I'll talk to the parents, any third party, step parents, kind of look at the whole picture and then make a recommendation. After I make a recommendation, that oftentimes that recommendation, it's accepted, but the judge or commissioner can still, kind of trump that recommendation. So it's just a recommendation, but that's often, a very high conflict situation. That's when those custody evaluations are ordered. So parenting consultation is just like a short phone call, just once or twice, that we have with parents just to help them with like some minimal parenting skills, right? So if they don't have, these families don't have any moderate or severe concerns with their kids relating to parenting. So if they have they need help setting rules or understanding what chores are appropriate for their kids. So that's, what that parenting consultation can help with. And then co-parenting therapy, that one involves divorced parents to help them parent their children better. So with co-parenting therapy, we help the parents understand, their child behavior. Why are their kids behaving the way they are when maybe they weren't when they were together? What are those changes that are happening right now? We help parents with consistency, communication, healthy expectations. Now, with that, there are oftentimes when parents are too high conflict, and they're just really not able to co-parent. And in those cases, we can help them come up with a plan to be able to parent their children in the best way possible without having, that constant communication that co-parenting, often needs.
Someone out there who's in a high conflict divorce right now, and they feel like they're never going to be able to co-parent with the other co-parent. What type of advice of hope do you have for them? Like, will it get better? Will it stay the same? Like, if they have to be with that person and work with them for another 15 or so years, what type of advice do you have for them?
Right. So that's a really good question. And the answer is it depends, right? It depends on a bunch of different components that are happening. Is there any mental illness that's happening? Is there any substance use that's taking place? Any abuse, right? Emotional abuse, was there any history of abuse in the relationship? But if they're struggling, the best thing that I would say is just, try co-parenting as much as you can. But parallel parenting is also one of the options that they can utilize that, would be helpful for them. And something that I advise, a lot of parents that are in situations like that is you don't have to attend every argument that you're invited to. Okay. And I think that that's something that works really well, right? Because oftentimes either parent is really trying to create that conflict and you don't have to be involved in it. So, yeah.
Pick your battles.
Exactly.
You just mentioned parallel parenting and parallel co-parenting. What is that?
So that is more of a restricted form of co-parenting, right? To where you have your own set of rules in your home. You have, your chores. You have your expectations at your home, and then the other parent has their own rules, right? You guys don't communicate about, okay, what are we going to do with this rule, being the same in both households. Is not the best case scenario because it's really hard for kids to go from one household that has one set of rules to another household. But at that point, you have to pick, what's best for you and your mental health, right? And if you can kind of set those boundaries, limit communication to as little as possible, and it helps you be better mentally, you're going to be a better parent to your child at that point. So, yeah.
Or it helps you become the best parent you can be for your child.
Exactly.
I think that's all my questions. You have very concise answers. Is there anything, like any points of advice or things you want to mention before we end?
No, I think that's it. I think, with kind of going back to co-parenting therapy, I think that it's a great tool. I wish that more people would utilize it. Because I think that it would really help a lot of divorced couples, kind of hash out some issues. I know that there's a misunderstanding oftentimes, right? Like, is it going to be approached the same way as like couples counseling? And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, right? Because they're divorced for a reason. But it's very focused on, the children's well-being, communication and having a healthy relationship without having any like negative intimacy.
Thank you so much for your time. If someone wants
Yeah.
to get a hold of Beehive Family Services, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So they can call or text at 385-238-8522, or they can email us at admin@beehivefamilyservices.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.